Okay.
All right. Well, it looks like we're live.
Yes. Hi, Kelly. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you, Ariana?
I am doing pretty good. It's been actually a pretty good day. Um,
Good.
so I had a pretty light day. Oh, my echo is going on my phone from us being live here. Um, yeah, I did, work. I'm working virtually right now, like a lot of people.
Hmm.
So I did some work and then I did kind of switch gears and did some more work. And then we saw each other already today.
Yes.
Hey,
Fantastic.
Christian, how are you doing?
Awesome. Glad that Christian's able to join us. I'm not sure I can see the comments of people, and maybe that's just because I'm just in the studio. Um, but yes, excited to have people come and join us for this conversation. No, it's been a nice, good day on my end as well. I have to say, like, team meeting was the highlight of the day. I'm excited for our conversation though, because I think this is going to replace that as the highlight of my day.
I know we have been kind of like geeking out about this all week. Um, I know we are pretty excited when we initially decided to do it, but even like now that this week is here, we're like, yes, we're gonna do this thing and we're going to talk. As folks are coming in, please do like the video, share it on your page, start a watch
Mhm.
party, tag some friends. I am going to attempt to do the same thing here as well. So if I can figure this out and we will get going on our conversation. Um, and I think I shared the YouTube. I don't think I've shared the Facebook. I'm technologically challenged, y'all. Um,
Oh, that's
I'm
all right.
where social media is concerned, I guess. I have a good grasp of, like computers and that kind of thing, but not so much with the social media stuff.
Oh, girl, you're
So
fine. Like, the only reason I have an Instagram is because my wife made it for me because she thought it was very important that I have one. So I don't do anything on it. So I am right there with you. Um,
that is awesome. So I so we are obviously our title today is who took God out of the schools? Who did it? And to kind of get us started, we're going to give you a little bit of background of who we are and our educational context. So, Callie, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, y'all know me as the associate minister here at the Faith Community. But my job that pays the bills, I'm a tutor manager at a company that's based in Atlanta that specializes in ACT and SAT prep. And we also do all kinds of other tutoring. Before that, I worked as a sub in Pinellas County, Florida, for a while. I don't think we talked about that. That was
I
an
was
interesting
I was just
time.
gonna say I didn't know that. How long did
Yeah.
you do that for?
It was only about 6 months, very short season, but I worked in a couple different schools in St. Pete. But I've been at the tutoring company I'm at right now, tutoring for 7 years. And so, like, there was a little overlap in a season where I had more jobs than I can count. Yeah, so not exactly like a traditional kind of educational experience or experience in education. Most of the work that I've done with students is one-on-one, but we do a lot of group classes that we partner with for schools. And I've also taught in the school system for a stint through the company that I work for. So I was a contract employee um, for the school that we were partnering with, but employed by the company that I'm with right now. So primarily working with high schoolers, teenagers, and I also subbed for middle school. Really exciting time with all those hormones raging. So that is kind of my context when it comes and background when it comes to this conversation.
Wow. So kudos on the middle school thing. I
God bless those teachers.
Yes, seriously, because I taught I had a group of middle schoolers for one class. So like for one semester, I think it was, and that was all I needed. I subbed once for a colleague of mine who was in elementary,
Mhm.
and that was all I needed for that. So, um, before I kind of dive into my spiel, can I ask what kind of brought you into, like doing the subbing and doing the tutoring?
So that's kind of an interesting question. I was looking to move to Atlanta for grad school to go to seminary, where Christian and I met, of course. Um, and I needed a part-time job to pay bills, pay rent, and some friends of mine who I had gone to undergrad with, who then came to Atlanta to go to the same seminary, were on staff at the church that the company that I work with rents space from. They rent the third floor of the building for like classrooms and storage and stuff. And so my friends were just like, "Hey, there's a tutoring company upstairs. They seem pretty cool. I think they're looking for part-time help. You should apply." So I applied, and that was that. But I really fell in love with the work. So even after I graduated from school, there's just something about working with students and helping them reach these different milestones, and particularly working with high school students in the college admissions process and helping them get excited about figuring out like where they're going to go, what they want to do. That kind of stuff has been extremely rewarding just to be a part of their lives for that small season, and a season that's really stressful for a lot of students, just to be able to provide some level of calm and encouragement. It was just, there's just something extremely rewarding about that. So I graduated from seminary 4 years ago, right? But I'm still doing this work. So yeah.
Gotcha. Um, yeah, so for myself, I guess I kind of have been an educator. I mean, all my life, really, right? I kind
Mm-hmm.
of just have always been that helper. I was the quote unquote teacher's pet, and
Same.
kind of went through school. Um, Smartness was not valued. You know what I mean? That wasn't the popular
Mm.
thing
Right.
in my little circle world. So, um, I actually that is what I went to school for. I am a
Cool.
teacher. I'm an educator. So I got my bachelor's degree in secondary education with a Spanish major and a psychology minor, and I taught high school. So I subbed, briefly, but I got a job pretty much right out of college,
Mm.
and I worked at a small K through 12 charter school first, and then I got my master's degree during my time there. So I have a master's as well, a Master of Arts in Applied Spanish Linguistics. And with that, then I was also able to begin teaching at our university here. So I am also an adjunct professor. Um, I've had a few different teaching positions. Actually, I'm actually at my fourth school
Oh
in
wow.
terms of high school teaching. Yeah,
Yeah.
so not for, bad. It just as I grow, things don't always grow with you.
Right.
And so I've been, you know, now I'm in a really unique work environment, and I love what I'm doing because I've actually moved a little bit, oddly enough, I've moved away kind of from instruction, which is really strange for me because I thought that I would always, like, I would never leave the classroom, until I like
Mm.
retired and became a full-time college professor. Um, we learn, we grow.
Right.
And so now I have a little bit more flexibility in my position, so I get to do a lot of different things. I prefer my specialty is the adolescents and young adult population.
Mhm.
So, like we said, bless those teachers who handle the middle school and the elementary kids.
Mhm.
So, and I have been doing in education for the last 11 years. So,
Wow.
yeah, it has been a while. So, one of the things that we kind of wanted to start off talking about, obviously, we are talking about who took God out of schools. If you're just coming in, please do go ahead and share the stream and tag your friends. Also, if you are like what you are seeing today and you have not yet been with us, you can, as the ticker is pointing down here, you can text disruptive to 31996 and get connected with us. And also, there are ways to give there. We have multiple platforms for giving if your heart is open to do so. So, oh my goodness, my other cousin is on here. So,
Oh,
my cousin Vivian is on here. Hey, cuz. And Christian is my cousin also. So cousins meet cousins. Um, that's awesome. So one of the things that we kind of wanted to start with when we were having this conversation was that there were some regional and differences in how we experienced God in school. So I was
mhm.
kind of the I was confused when this kind of conversation started coming out about taking God out of schools, because I'm like, well, where did he go, and when was, what was the shift, so um for me in my area, I'm up north, in Michigan, so it was it wasn't something that God wasn't really prevalent. We weren't there wasn't like constant conversations in school about God or prayer or any of these things. And really the shift kind of became um that all of a sudden we couldn't talk about the thing that we weren't actually talking about to begin with for me. So
Mhm.
it was really confusing when folks started saying that. As I started going through my educational training and becoming an educator myself, I began to understand it as we just had to be careful with what we did talk to kids about and make sure that we weren't, like spreading a belief system or things like this. But
Mhm.
there was definitely still the component of, if you were in the community, you knew the people who went to church with you, obviously. You knew other families who went to church, even if they weren't the same denomination as you. Those things weren't secret by any means, and kids talked about those as they came up, as needed. In our tradition, it was, you always ended up talking about church as kids, and even to an extent with teachers and faculty, because we have our baptisms and our communions and our quinceañeras, are a big one. And so those conversations were kind of general, and there was always, the meet at the pole events to do like the morning
Yep.
meeting in the morning and train and that kind of stuff was allowed. So that was kind of my experience with that. I know you kind of have a different experience. So
Little bit, yeah. So I grew up in the Bible Belt, small town in East Tennessee, and we were, as I was reflecting over the conversation this week, remembered a couple of things that we didn't talk about in kind of like our pre-conversation to this one. I remember in high school, um, there was this guy who came and spoke. He was allowed to come speak to us under the guise of like being a motivational speaker, but he was actually an evangelist. And so they invited this evangelist to come speak at our public high school. And he gave like this super like motivational pep talk. And he's like, I'm not, and then he explicitly said, I'm not allowed to talk to you about Jesus. So if you want to hear about that, you need to come to Second Baptist Church tonight. I'm going to be here every night this week. And so,
wow.
right, and that is just one of many, many things that happened at my high school regularly. Um, and so we had some, like for our sex ed, they had this Christian organization who is like, I forget which one is the big national one, True Love Waits or the Silver Ring thing. But one of those, whichever one's not the big national one, was just like a smaller local one that they invited to come to our high school every year to do like a abstinence only sex ed workshop for like a week with all of like the juniors and seniors. Um, and it was just, yeah, lots of, there was a very transient um, wall between church and state. And by transient, I mean non existent. And we also had a lot of student-led events. We had prayer circle every morning at school. We had see you at the pole, but instead of like treating it like a daily thing, that was just like a big once a year rally for us, where we were trying to get all the people who didn't come to the prayer circle in the mornings to come. And yeah, so a lot of the teachers were really open about their faith. And it was just kind of assumed that, well, Christianity is the right religion. So everyone here, of course, is a Christian, unless it's been otherwise said. So that was my growing up experience. So when people started talking about this conversation of like, oh, well, they're taking God out of school, it's like the people, yeah, sneaky evangelism for sure. So it was very much like people were legitimately angry at where I grew up. They're like, we're not allowed to talk about God or Jesus. And it's like the country is like falling away to sin because we're not allowed to bring God to school with us. So it was very much the people in my circles where I'm from, it very much felt like that was getting stripped away from them.
So more of an infringement. And you said something important there, like just that assumption that, everybody's Christianity was a thing. So when we're talking about taking God out of the schools, that is what we're referring to. We're referring to our Christian God. And when we spoke before, you had talked about, because I asked a question like, what did it look like before? So we have our own, personal experiences. And so can you kind of talk a little bit about just the shift and the tolerance movement and how we kind of got to this don't talk about God in school?
Yeah, so I think again, history and like dates with history are particularly not my strong suit, but like identifying themes is kind of a thing. So I think we have this theme of like, even just like historically, there has been a strong connection between school and church because schools originated from the idea of Sunday school, like way back in the day, like thinking about like when the Puritans came across from England to here because they were establishing the colonies to try and get some level of religious freedom. There was no such thing as public school. So after Christianity began to develop over the course of a couple of centuries here in the United States, there became this push for biblical literacy, which then, of course, had to push for actual literacy because you can't teach people biblical literacy until they can read. So Sunday school was the first like actual kind of formalized education that we had. So from there we get the universities, from there we get K through 12, and like it just kind of evolved over the years. And so as the distance from the church and this now state institution has grown, I think it's been kind of more challenging for that split to happen. So then we have, kind of this culture of people who are now waking up and realizing, okay, well, not everybody here is Christian. That we've got Muslims, we have Buddhists, we have Hindus who are here in this space as part of creating this beautiful country's melting pot, right? And so this
Christian is learning things today.
Yeah, so glad to do some teaching. We get to do some teaching while we talk about school. I love it.
Cool.
So then you have this idea of tolerance. And that's where I think the big shift started to happen. You have people specifically like Mike Huckabee, who's started saying things like, well, school shootings are happening because we took God out of school, or because we're being more tolerant and we have to allow these sinful conversations or these sinful things to happen, and we're not allowed to share the gospel. So I think people like Mike Huckabee, Mike, I think his last name is Hargy. I forget his name. I saw a post of his the other day and kind of had to stop rolling my eyeballs. But anyways, like people like them, all this kind of saying caricature of the middle-aged white man who is a preacher or an evangelist or something along those lines telling their base that um, the state took God out of schools, took your God out of school. And they're expecting you to listen to teachers talk about Islam and listen to them talk about um, the Quran and listen to them talk about these other religions, which, when in actuality, it's like, well, you kind of have to mention the historical movement of these religious movements to understand how US history or world history has evolved. Right. And I think that that was something that you had talked about with like one of your colleagues too. And like she got to that point and made that very clear statement. I'm not teaching you this because I'm trying to evangelize you. I'm teaching you this because it's important for you to know this for your education. Um, so yeah, I think that that's kind of like the big shift, though, this idea of tolerance. And for so many people, tolerance is such a bad word. It's like, oh, it means I can't tell you about your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I'm not allowed to save your soul because tolerance won't let me. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the funny thing, because so if you have been around the faith community for a little while, it doesn't, in even just for a short while, it doesn't take you long to recognize that our titles are kind of spins on our views. And so this whole idea of like who so when we ask that question, like who took God out of the schools, it's kind of like, oh, we did? Like, where did God
right.
go? Like, did we just we swipe our badge to get in the building and we leave God right there? Like,
Hmm.
what happens? And I think that for me, I remember kind of what motivated the conversation was I was talking about this with somebody and I'm like, but did we though? Because
Yeah.
I love God, right?
Hmm.
Um, I love God, I love Jesus, I love everyone, right? And I walk into that building every single day and God is with me. The Holy Spirit emanates from my being, and that is a part of who I am. So for me, it wasn't a matter of God being taken out of the school. That was part of the confusing part for me, because it's like if I'm there, God's there.
Exactly.
If you, as a person who believes in, and again, we're talking Christianity here, like, do you leave God somewhere? And what's interesting for me is that you said something there, and yes, exactly, like we don't move without God. Like, if you are a
Hmm.
person who believes in God, like, God is always with you. There's nowhere you go
Exactly.
that God isn't there. And I think that is it's so interesting to me, one, that we want to control information so much, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So let's not talk about other religions in schools, even as it relates to the history of human beings, human existence. We want to control that information, and it's always been odd to me, because it's like, so do you think you're going to catch it if
Mm.
I start talking about Islam, if I start talking about, any Eastern tradition, really, are you afraid you're going to catch it? Right? Because, and
Right.
oftentimes I think that comes from, and this is common just in colonialism in general, right? That, what you've done to others is going to be done to you, because this is how we were colonized, right? The religion, Christianity in its different denominational forms came over with its people, and then they used religion as a domination tool,
Hmm.
and we've got to convert everyone, right? So I can see where um people might not even realize generationally where that fear comes from, right? Because this is what we did. This is what
Yeah.
we did. We stripped people of their beliefs, and we converted them to something different. And so I think that there's a lot of fear, like you said, that tolerance is such an ugly word for some people. Um, but it's that element of it, that God asks us right here. Well, before I get into that, you made a comment about that we didn't take God out of schools. We did what?
Right. So I am one, as an educator, and I'm sure that you feel the same way, that like our words are important and we need to mean what we say and say what we mean. And so I think saying that we took God out of school is, obviously we don't think that that's right, in this space, like in our conversation. Um, but what people mean when they say that is they took evangelism out of school. They took proselytizing out of school. And so people are actually angry that they can't use school as like their mission field and say like, well, I have all these students, I can win them over to Jesus, I can save their souls. Like that is what people are angry about. And I can't think of any time that I've heard somebody actually say that. It's always been, well, they took God out of school, and that's why our country is going to hell in a handbasket. It's either that, or we'll let gay people get married. It's one of those two things, always.
Yes. And then and Christian makes the comment, tolerance implies power. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's almost like we're giving this. So my perspective is, like I said, if I'm in the building, God is in the building.
Right.
And so what's interesting is we had another comment here, we don't ask, don't tell, but they can't stop the God we serve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, one of our 5 keys here at the faith community is the greatest commandment. And so we are called, right, to love God, but to show that love through loving our neighbor, right? And of course loving ourselves. And so when I walk into space, that is what I'm walking into a space with all the time, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that I am going to do what God has called me to do and to show love. I don't have to mention God's name to do that ever. And what's interesting is that I get this, and I think you mentioned too, a lot of times my students are the ones who bring it up to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, Mrs. V, do you go to church? Do you believe in God? Do and so those conversations are I've never felt afraid of those conversations, and
Mm-hmm.
it may be a privilege of the places that I've worked in. It may be part of my personality. It is probably a combination of both, but I never
Probably.
shy away from those conversations. And I also, though, never force kids to um believe what I believe or tell them that what they believe is wrong or anything like that. What I probably would get in trouble for is giving kids permission to not believe what their parents do.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very specific age group, though. In a lot of cases, I am speaking to, legal adults. And it's not that I encourage kids to stray from, their home belief system, but I ask them to really think. I ask them to do what we do here at the faith community. I ask them to critically think and ask the hard questions to be sure that what they're believing, right,
Mm-hmm.
is true to them. And
Absolutely.
most of the times, you know, if not usually, kids do ascribe to the belief system of their parents, and so it's but there's so much fear surrounding that. And I think that that was another thing that we talked about. I don't know how we put it, in terms of, carrying your belief with you versus imparting your belief.
Mm-hmm.
So I carry my belief with me all the time. It doesn't mean that I'm over here trying to convert your kid, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but this is the fear and the irrationality that can set in sometime. Um, and I think that's just like, it's so strange to me because especially if we are proclaimed to be Christian, right? Then God said to love your neighbor. He didn't say you get to choose who your neighbor is. You can go back on our YouTube channel and watch a whole little message about love, who's your neighbor. Um, and I think for me, when you expand, right? When you expand your view in that way, it increases your capacity to love, and you treat people and you see people through the eyes of God, you know? And it's just so different to me. I don't know what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think because I think especially with working with the age group that we work with, specifically like with teenagers, um, they are a generation who values genuineness. Like they want you to be real with them. And so it's like that difference between like carrying your beliefs with you and imparting your beliefs, right? It's not like we can go into a space and be anything other than who we are, right? So when
Mhm.
I taught in the school, public school, for that one semester, again, I am not a veteran at that at all, just my one semester. Um, I knew that I had to earn these kids' trust because I was teaching in a school where it was very, very a beautiful experience. I learned so much from my students, and I hope that I created a safe space for them. I was one of a handful of white staff members in a predominantly Black school in a high immigrant community on the south side of Atlanta. And so, with absolutely justified like hesitation, they walk into my classroom and they're like, well, who are you and how can you relate to us? So I knew that I needed to be real with them. So they knew that outside of what I did at the tutoring company, that I worked as a minister, and they thought that was the weirdest thing in the world because they also knew that I'm gay and that I'm married. Because I accidentally outed myself in class because I don't even know what happened with my computer. It restarted, and then the background that I had up on the smart board changed to my old desktop backdrop, and it was a picture of me kissing Haley on the cheek, and they were all like, "Ah, that's so cute! Oh, that's a woman! Oh, you're gay!" Like it was just this whole thing, and they're like, "Oh, the way you're a pastor, what?" Like it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. Um, and so, but that did open a door where people would come and talk to me. Like I mentioned to you, one of my favorite students. I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but we do. Um, that's just how it works. Um, she had spoken with me a little bit about how she was struggling with like reconciling her faith and her discovering like her sexuality. So I pointed her towards some resources on that. And then one day she just asked me, "Where did Jesus grow up?" And so I pulled up a map of like the Fertile Crescent on the screen because, I mean, at this point, the students were doing self guided learning stuff, and she was done with her assignments. And so she just came and asked me the question. And so I pull up this map of like the Fertile Crescent, North Africa, and everything. And she looks at it and she said, "I knew it. I knew Jesus had to look like me." And God, like that was one of the most powerful moments I've ever had as an educator, as a minister, as a human, because it's like it shouldn't have taken you this long to find out. And so it's like we bring this intersection of like all of my intersectionality in me as a gay woman who's married, who is a minister, who is a millennial, who is an educator, like all of these different intersections. Like I bring with me wherever I go. I can't leave any of that at the door. Um, and so it's just in how do we do all the work that needs to be done, right? Because like obviously it was not my place to shove any kind of religion down her throat.
Mhm.
But she needed to know that Jesus wasn't white, right? Like
You're blaspheming right now, Kelly. Better be careful.
right. Well, somebody tell that to Eric Metaxas. Oi. But anyway, so it's just like, how do we reconcile that, right? Like
Mhm.
nobody took God out of school, but there's still work that needs to be done, and can it be done in a way that's not evangelism and proselytizing? Spoiler, I think yes.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, and on that note too, we do have to start wrapping up. Our time is closing out.
mm,
The last thing I kind of want to say is kind of leading off of your point there. Like, is there another way to do this? I think the reminder to ourselves as Christians that, you know, Christians were not self-proclaimed. It was the other people who gave that name to followers of Christ.
Yep.
And so and that's because of what they were doing and how they were following. And so while words are important, of course, actions are oftentimes even more important and even more impactful than words in some cases. And so for me, taking inspiration from the original Christians, right, is to say that my actions are what evangelize God. My actions are what show who I am as a person and what my beliefs are. And it doesn't, and furthermore, a lot of folks who come in and just speak words don't follow these up with actions, right? And so I would encourage, Christian and anybody else, right? Whether they're not Christian or whatever it is, we all have our beliefs. And so walk that model. Walk that model, because I think one of the things that most of the different belief systems have in common is love. Care and concern for your fellow human being. And if you can do that, then God hasn't gone anywhere.
Yes. Well, I think one of the things, just off that point real quick, because I know we got to wrap up. One of the things that all of the major world religions have in common is that every single one of their holy texts has some version of the golden rule in it. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think no matter what religion we're from, if we took that as our model, right, that would show the love of God, however anyone understands God, better than anything we could say. It's like that one quote I mentioned the other day, which I found out recently is attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, but there's no proof that he actually ever said it. So nobody knows who actually said this, but I love it. Preach the gospel always, sometimes use words.
Exactly. There it is. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of TFC Presents Real Talk. We will be back. Well, not we specifically, but someone will be in front of you next Thursday, the same time at 7:30. Before that, though, we have Faith and Film coming up on Sunday at 7 o'clock.
Yay.
So join us in the Facebook group for that. And next Tuesday, we also have another round of TFC Presents, and I believe it is, oh man, I don't know what it is. It's either like it's one of the series from our Daily Bread series. I think it's like Time to Treat Yourself or Therapy Thursday, one of these things. Join us here Tuesday at 7:30. Sunday before that, join the Facebook group, Faith and Film. And we will see you soon. Oh, and also, if you haven't done so already, go check out christianasmith.com, and you can pre-order our Pastor Christian Smith's book and learn all about Greatest Commandment theology. And hey, bring God with you everywhere.